What's good, team? Welcome to another Small James coding tutorial where today we're going to be talking about SvelteKit authentication with Firebase. We're going to cover everything you need to know about implementing Firebase's authentication into your SvelteKit project so that you can have private routes. We'll learn how to do private routes, handle sign up, sign in, reset password by email if you've forgotten it, updating your password from within a private route, and same with updating your email, and ultimately just tons and tons of other best practices that are great for you to know. So here's just a really quick demo of the finished project. We can see that it's not styled, but all the functionality and logic is there. We can sign up and register a user, or we can already have an account and log in. We can click the forgot password button if we've typed in an email. But what we're going to do is just sign up a new email. So it's going to be newemail@gmail.com. We're going to give it a password. We're going to make sure that the password is the same. If it's not, the forms will not work. We could submit that account, and then we get brought to this private dashboard route where we can do all sorts of things. We can see that if we come into our Firebase project, we have a new user, which is our newemail.com. So that's perfect. We can from here update the email. So newemail2@gmail.com. We can submit that. That gets updated. And if we reload this page, we can see that it's updated here as well. Just there. Equally, we can update the password. So before it was 123456, now it might be nice. I can submit that, and that will have updated the password. I can refresh the page, and the user is persisted. We can see that we get a nice little loading screen, and then I can log out to the front screen. And if I try to log in again with newemail2@gmail.com and my new password, nice, and submit, we once again get logged into our application. Now it's all protected, so if I try come to a private dashboard without being logged in, we can see that we just get brought straight back home to the home screen and the authentication login screen. So if you're looking to add authentication to your SvelteKit projects, this is by far the easiest way to do it, and it's totally protected, 100% secure, and fully functional. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and sub, super appreciate it. Let's get into it. So to dive into the video, the first thing I've done is opened up a terminal just here. I'm inside of a directory that I want to create my project in. And we're going to start off by running npm create svelte at latest. And we're going to name our project, which is just going to be SvelteKit Auth, just like that. We're going to click enter, install the required packages. We're going to select a skeleton project. We're not going to have any type checking. We can have linting, prettier, yep, sure, playwright, no, and no testing. And now we can cd into SvelteKit Auth, just like that. And we can open that up inside of our Visual Studio Code editor, just here. So now we can see we have all of the boilerplate code to run our SvelteKit project. We have all the source files just here, everything we need. So the next thing we're going to do is initialize Firebase. So now to get started on initializing our Firebase project, we're just going to come over to Firebase in Google, load that up. That should log you in if you have a Google account. I already do, otherwise you might have to log in. And what we're going to do is click Get Started just here. That's going to take us to the console. We're going to add a new project, name the project, which is just going to be SvelteKit Auth, just like that. Continue. We don't need any of the testing for this particular one. If you're building a big application, you can absolutely do that. Now we're just going to let our project create, and then we can configure the authentication. So now that's all done, we can click continue, and that will take us over to this homepage just here, where we have, authentication, Firestore. We've got some stuff over here that's like build, all these different categories. And the first thing is we're going to add authentication. Now, if you wanted to add a database, you can use the Cloud Firestore. I'm going to make a follow-up tutorial on how to do a full stack project with both of these, so stay tuned for that. But in this case, we're just going to focus on the authentication. So we'll click here. That's going to take us through to this page. We'll click Get Started. That will initialize the authentication system for us. And what we're going to do from this screen is click email and password. We're going to enable that and then just click save. So now we can see that that is enabled for us. We can come over to users and see that we have no users here. As we create them, they will show up here. But now the next thing that we have to do is come back into our project overview and decide what kind of Firebase implementation we're going to be having. Now, you could do iOS, Android, or web. We're going to need web, so we're going to click here. We're going to name our app SvelteKit Auth, just like the regular name. We don't need hosting, and we're going to register it. And now we're just going to follow these instructions and configure all of this. So here we can see that we need to run npm install Firebase. So we're going to copy that command and open up a new terminal. And in here, we're just going to run npm install Firebase. And so now that's all done, we can see that we have a node modules file come up. So that's all good. And the next thing we're going to do is create a file where we can configure all of this information. So for this file, what we're going to do is inside of our source folder, we're going to create another folder called lib. And in here, we're going to have another folder, and that one's going to be called Firebase. And inside of here, we're going to make a new file called firebase.client, so that it only runs on the client side, .javascript. So this is going to be a little JavaScript file. And in here, we're just going to go ahead and copy all of this straight across, just like that. Now we're going to have some further configuration to do on this, because as these keys are, they would not be protected. And so if you were to push this code to your GitHub, everyone could see all of these keys. So that's not very secure. So we're going to create a new file called .env, and we're going to copy all these keys across into them. So we're just going to go like this, copy everything over. And we're going to change the naming convention so that all of them start off with vt underscore and then the name of the key. So that's going to be vt underscore auth domain vt underscore project ID, vt underscore storage bucket, vt underscore messaging sender ID, and finally vt underscore app ID, just like that. And so now I can go ahead and just delete all this other stuff, just like that. And now we're going to replace all of these quotations with just equals signs, because you do not need the quotation inside of a .env file for these keys. And we're going to do the same. And at the end of the file, we're just going to remove all of the extra mumbo jumbo in there. So just like that. So now we have this .env file, and we can read these keys in from our .env file by doing the following. We can say import.meta.env.name of key, so vt API key, just like that. Now I'm going to copy that and do the same for this one. So this is just going to be underscore auth domain. This one will be project ID. In here, we're going to have storage bucket, messaging sender ID, and finally app ID, just like that. So now we have all of our keys protected, and we're using our environment variables. You want to make sure that .env is added to your gitignore so that file does not get pushed to GitHub. And now the next thing we're going to do is slightly less conventional. So we're going to initialize Firebase slightly differently. We're going to start off by saying let Firebase app, just like this. And now we're going to run some logic. The reason we run this logic is because of the way SvelteKit initializes Firebase. It's just a little bit fiddly. So sometimes it can actually initialize a project that doesn't have any of our keys wired up correctly. So it would just be an empty, useless project. So we just want to make sure that if that happens, we delete it and we initialize our project correctly. So we're going to run an if check that says if not get apps, just like this, and that's a function call, and that is going to be imported from Firebase app. So if that's not true, and more specifically, we want to get the length of that parameter because that's going to be an array. So if that array is 0 or empty, then we want to run some logic, and otherwise we want to run some other logic. So in here, what we want to do is we just want to say Firebase app is equal to, and now we're going to initialize our app and pass in the Firebase config file. And if the else statement is true, so if we already have an app initialized, what we're going to do is just say Firebase app is equal to get app, just like that. So it's not the get apps, it's just the get the current app. We're going to import that up there as well. And now what we're going to do is actually just delete this app, so that will also need to be imported. We're going to pass the Firebase app in there, and then we're just going to reinitialize it properly because this app that already exists will not be configured with all of our keys. So if we just reinitialize it with all of our keys, then we should have a perfectly functioning Firebase config file. So now the next thing we're going to have to do is configure some authentication imports. So what that's going to look like is we're going to import get auth, just like that, from Firebase /auth. And we're also going to get set persistence and in memory persistence just to handle some login stuff adequately. And now down here, what we're going to do is after we have initialized our project, we're just going to say export const auth is equal to get auth and pass in our Firebase app. And so that's going to give us an auth parameter that we can access from other files now that we have initialized Firebase. So with that file all working, we should actually be good to run npm run dev, and we can see that our project has started up on localhost 5173. So we can paste that over here, and we see that that brings us to the SvelteKit homepage, which is just this. And so if I add James in there, we get James. Now we're going to be getting rid of this momentarily. And instead what we're going to be replacing it with is a file in here that is layout.svelte. Now, if we use the plus key, that's going to be a layout that wraps everything in our entire project. So files in this routes folder that start with a layout are special. So this layout is going to wrap everything. So we're going to first render out all of our content just in here with a slot component. So we can see that that comes back on the page. If we added something up here that said James, we can see that James will get added on top, and this would be consistent for any other pages that we had. And this layout folder is where we're going to execute a lot of the second half of our Firebase initialization content. So we're going to do that by opening up a script tag just in here. And in the script tag, the first thing we're going to have to import is an onMount. So we're going to type import onMount from Svelte, and now we're going to call this onMount, and we're going to pass it in an arrow function, so an anonymous arrow function, and this is where we're going to subscribe to our Firebase authentication. So we're going to say const unsubscribe, just like this, is equal to auth. So we're going to access that auth from this other file over here, so we'll have to import that. That's going to be import auth from /lib/firebase/firebase client. So now we have access to auth, and auth has a method that is called onAuth state changed, and this accepts a user as an argument, and in here we can set the user to a store that can be accessed from any component. So now that we're in here, for the second, what we're just going to do is console.log the user. And we're actually going to now initialize our store that's going to persist our user across all different components. So for that, we're going to create a new folder in here that's called store, just like that. And I'm actually just going to change this to stores in case you want to have multiple. And we're just going to have one file that is authstore.js. And inside of this store.javascript file, the first thing we're going to do is import writable, just like that, from the Svelte store, and that should be a lowercase w. And we're also going to have to import once again our auth from our special file. So here we can see the import is just down there like that, so that's perfect. And now we can go ahead and define our store, so we can say export const auth store is equal to writable, and we can just pass it in the initialized value that we want. So in my particular case, what I'm going to do is have a parameter called isLoading, and that's going to be set to true. And we're going to have a second one that's called current user, and that's just going to be set to null. So initially we're not going to have a current user. So now that we've created our store, the next thing we're going to do is initialize some auth handlers. So I'm going to say export const auth handlers, just like this, and this is going to be equal to an object. And in here we're going to have a whole lot of functions, for example sign up, and that's just going to have the value, which is an anonymous function or an arrow function that we can call to run these methods. So when we sign up a user, we're going to have an email and a password. So we're going to accept those two things in as arguments. It's going to be asynchronous, so we're going to add async to the front. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to go await, create user with email and password. We can see that that imports from the top. And in here, we're just going to have to pass in the auth, the email, and the password. So that's our first function. The next one we're going to need is a logout, and so that's going to be the same, async. This time we don't need any arguments, and we can just await sign out and pass in the auth just like that. The next one's going to be reset password. And this one is going to, well, they're all going to be async. This one's going to take an email. We're not going to need a password because this is if you've forgotten your password. So this is the send email reset password. And in here, what we're going to do is await send password reset email, and that's just going to be auth and email. The next one is update email. That's going to be async email, arrow function, await update email, just like that. That's going to take the auth and the email. And then the last one is going to be update password, just like that. And once again, async password. And we're just going to await update password, pass in the auth and the new password. So these are all of our auth handler functions, and we can import them into all of our different files. So now that we have our store, we can now come back into our layout file and add the end of our subscriber logic here. So basically what we're going to do is once we get this user, so when we authenticate, we get the user, and now we're going to set the user to our store. So we can import auth store from /stores/authstore.js, just like that. And now we can run auth store.update. We can take the current value of the store, which is just going to be current. And in here, what we can do is return, and we're just going to spread current so that we persist everything that is currently in there that doesn't need changing. And we're going to say is loading is false. And we're going to say current user to user that we have accepted just up here. And so just like that, we'll have saved our user to our store, and that can be accessed from any component. So now that we've done that, we have no issues. That's all going to be working. The next thing we're going to do is start creating some routes. So in here, what I'm going to do is create a component, and this is going to be an authentication component. And this page is the page that runs at the /path. So no path. It's our home route. And so I'm going to create a new folder called components. And in here, we're going to have a new file, and it's going to be auth.svelte, just like that. So now that we have that, we can render out auth just in here. That comes up on the page. And we're also quickly just going to come into this section just here. And we're going to add a style tag to our entire component. And we've got two things to do. We're going to select everything. We're going to say box sizing, border box. Margin is going to be 0, as is padding. So that will push everything to the corner. And the next thing we're going to do is target the body, which is where everything is rendered. And we're just going to say min height of 100 view height, so it occupies the full page. We can see that that works by setting the background equal to green. So our whole page has gone green. We obviously don't want that. But what we will do is give it a display, a flex direction of column, and that should just about do it. So now we can come back into our page and our auth, and actually, I lie, we're actually going to come into the layout and just first wrap the slot inside of a main container. And so that's just going to be the main component, just like that. And in here, we're going to give this a class of main container. And then down below, we can have a style tag and target main container. And I'm actually just going to jump that content here. I'm going to just remove that and instead just paste it in here, I think. So we'll actually set the page height here and just say display flex and flex direction and column. So this should be equivalent. So if I say background green, we would expect the full page to go green, and it does. So that's cool. So now we have our main container, we've got our auth working. We can come into this component and start defining our layouts. So what we're going to do at the top is have an h1. Well, actually, I might just wrap everything inside of a div first. And inside of the div, we're going to have a form. Just above the form, we're going to have a page or an h1 tag that says sign up for the second. And now we're going to have a whole bunch of input labels that we're going to have our actual inputs in. So here we're going to have a label, and we will have an input inside of that label just like that. So the input is going to have a type of equal to text. So this is going to be for the email. We're also just going to give this a placeholder equal to email. Might as well capitalize that. Now we're going to have another label just below, and this one's going to be type of password, and this one's going to be password. So here we can see our sign up form is coming in. We're going to give this a class name of sign up, or actually even better, container. And we're going to open up a style tag down below that is .container. So inside of our .container here, we're going to give this also a display of flex, a flex direction of column. Actually, even better, what I'm going to do is give this a display of grid, and I'm going to say place items center. So that's going to center our whole form. We also want to give this a flex 1 so that it occupies the container, the width of the whole container. And actually that seems to be automatically splitting things, so I might change that back to flex, flex direction column, and instead what I'll center it with, instead I'll center it with align items center, justify content center. So now that's all smack bang in the middle of the page. The next thing we'll do is target the form inside of the container and just give that a display of flex and a flex direction of column so that these elements sit one above each other. Now I'm not really going to focus too much on styling this, but the last thing we'll need inside of this is a button that says submit, just like that. So now we have a cute little submit button, and what we will also need is an optional input, so we can do that by adding if. And if register is true, which is a variable that we haven't defined yet, we can close the if tag. And in here we can just have a third one, which is password, but the thing just says confirm password. So this is if you have to add a confirm password. So currently it doesn't exist because we haven't initialized that, so we can add a script just here, and we can say let register equal false. Just like that. So register is false, and then if I made that true, we can see that we get the confirm password element just there. So this is our little auth component. What we're also going to do is just bind all these values. So value is equal to email. We're going to add this to the password here. Password, and obviously I'm going to initialize these variables in just a second. So this one's going to be confirm password. And now up here we can say let email equal to empty string, let password equal empty string, and let confirm password equal empty string. So now we have these three things, and as I change them, the values all work, and that is cool. What we might just do is underneath the form here, we might just have a paragraph that says don't have an account, question mark, and then maybe another paragraph inside of that that just says sign up, and I'll just change that external one to a div. So here we have don't have an account, sign up, and we can put this inside of an if else depending on whether or not registration is true. So we can say if register is true, we can add an else block just like this, and then we can add close the if, and we can put this one inside of the register. So if register is true, then we actually want to have login, and in here we can have a div that says already have an account, and then we can have the paragraph tag in here, and that says sign up, log in, just like that. So now what will happen is if we change this to false, we would expect to swap round, and we can see that it does. Sign up, never, and if I change that to true, we get the login message. And we can actually do the exact same just here. We can make this a JavaScript parameter, and we can say register. If register is true, then we want it to say register, and if it's false, then we want it to say sign up, just like that. So register is true, and then if we say false, we would expect this to go away and this text down here to change. We can see that it does, and the last thing that we can do is just bind some functions here. and that is done by typing on click, just like that. We pass in an arrow function, and in here we can just say register is equal to false, so that will swap it back. And we can see that if we do that, we'll get this little error here that says we just have to pass in a different function. So we can just say on key down, you can pick any of them. I'll just make sure that goes back. On key down, and we'll just pass in an empty arrow function to satisfy that. So now that little error is gone. And then we can just copy this and paste it inside of this div here, and obviously set that to true. So now clicking on this is just going to swap us around to our other sign up form. So that's cool for our sign up form. The next thing we're going to do is wire up our function handle submit form, just like that. Now that is going to be an asynchronous function because we've got some asynchronous calls. And in here, what we're going to do is register our user. So obviously we're going to say if not email or not password, we just want to return nothing because nothing can happen. And we actually just want to do a third check that says if it's register and not confirm password. So if register is true and we don't have that, and I think that actually needs to be an or, then the submit button won't work. So that's all good. After that, we can say if it's register, so if register is true and password is equal to confirm password, so if both of those things are true, then we can run our register logic, and otherwise we can have an else block where we run our login logic. So in here, what we're going to do is we're just going to say try and catch. So we're going to try and catch the registration. If it's here, we're just going to console.log the error. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to await auth handlers. So these are what we defined before. We can import that at the top, and we can say sign up, and we can just pass in the email and the password to that function. So that's pretty cool. In this particular case down here, what we're just going to do is the exact same. So try catch error, open that up, console.log the error, except if it's not register, so if we're in the sign up screen, then what we're going to do is just say await auth handlers dot login, and we're going to pass in the email and the password, just like that. So that's pretty neat. We can see that that is correct. I actually haven't defined login. That's pretty silly, so we'll need to put that there. That'll be why that wasn't showing up. So login is just going to be async email password, just like that. Put a comma afterwards, and this is just going to be await login auth email password. I think that might actually be sign in with email and password. So we'll have to import that up the top, and we don't want that async up there. So there you can see we have sign in with email and password. So now our authentication and registration should just about work. The last thing we'll want to do is just wire the sign up to our login button, which is just here. So this is going to say on click, and we can just directly pass the handle submit just there. So now that on click works, we should see that if we do that, we get nothing. If we, well actually, why don't we just make sure? So in here, we R&D console.login the user. So we would actually expect to, so there we've got null. If I submit, nothing happens. If I add a password and submit, we get an error, and that's because there's no user with that. But if we sign up and we confirm the password, so let me just do one I can remember. We'll have to make sure that this is a correct email, otherwise that won't be happy. So we can actually come in here and just say type is email. Instead, we can say demo@banana.com, and that should actually say login. Let me just change that quickly so that that makes sense. Right at the top, we want this to say log in. So we have login. We confirm that that's working, and here we want demo@banana.com. .com 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Obviously in here you could add your auth logic, but now we're just going to click submit. And now you can see that we don't have any page redirection because we haven't done that yet. But we actually have our current user in here. We console.logged this user, and now that's what we're going to set to our store. So here we can see that that stores things like the email. We have a whole lot of metadata, like when it was created, when it was last logged in. We have reload user, tokens, everything you could possibly want. So that is super excellent. And now we can access that from any component. So logically, the next thing that we want to do is actually just reroute our user to a new page. And so we're going to add that page in here by creating a new file called dashboard. So in here, we're going to render out a plus page.svelte because that is the default page component for that route. So now we will see that if I go to the dashboard, we end up at this page. And if I type in James, we get James at the top. So this is our route. And this is actually going to be our protected route. So I might actually just save that, rename that to a private dashboard. So now 404 doesn't work, but if I change that to private dashboard, just like that, we get to James. So this is going to be our private route. And so what we can do is at the end of a successful authentication, if we successfully log in, then what we can do is reroute a user to that particular page. And I'm actually going to do that at the inside of this function, but at the bottom of this logic block just here, I'm going to say if auth store. Now auth store will be updated because remember we have that on state change logic in here. So we have this listening component here that's going to update it. So down here, what we want to do is make this a reactive statement. So this gets executed when we run. And we're just going to say if the current user exists and is not null, then we're going to say window.location.href is equal to /private dashboard, just like that. So now when I go back to our home page and register a user, and actually if we just refresh this page over here, so let's just say continue to the console, we go into authentication, we can see that we actually have this user here. So you can do a whole lot of stuff. You can reset, disable, delete that account. But let's just, for the sake of it, register another one, demo2@hello.com. Nice. Submit that. You can see that we get rerouted to our private dashboard because this function was true. Current user now exists, and we have access to our current user. So that's super cool. Now, the next thing we're going to do is just actually render out some information here. So we're just going to add an H1 that says current user. And in here, we're going to have some logic that we'll need to get from the store. So we can just say script, open up a script tag. We can access the auth store. So we can just create a parameter that says let email, just like that. And we can say authstore.subscribe current value, open that up, and we can just set email equal to authstore.current_user.email. And now we can pass in that email just there. And we would actually expect to get that on the front end. However, that did not work because I used the wrong thing. That should be current.current user. And it's not getting the parameter email. So what we might just do is console.log current, see what that returns, and console that out. So we get current user is null, which means that we've lost our user. And so we can see that just here, it took a second to actually render out the user. And so what I'm instead going to do is just make sure that that uses the conditional syntax. So now it's only going to render it out if it exists. So it's initially undefined. And then once the current user loads, we get demo banana. So that's super chill. Now inside of this route here, this layout will still work. So everything we implemented in here in terms of this main container will be correct. So we can just go ahead and wrap this inside of a div. And down here, we can quickly open up a style tag and we can just select the div and say flex is 1, so it occupies the full width of the page. And we could just say display flex direction column, justify content center, and align items center, just like that. And now we can see that everything is centered in the middle of the page. We've got that element just there. We could actually also select the H1 and say text align center, and now that user is centered in the middle of the page. Although the one thing I would also recommend adding is just some logic here that says if, and we're going to subscribe to the auth store dot current user, just like that. So that's saying if the current user exists, and then else if it doesn't, we're just going to render out a loading screen. So just like this. So what we're going to do is in here, we're just going to say div, and that's just going to say loading ... And inside of this top block, we can have this div. Wrong one, just there. So now we'll see that when I reload this page, it just says loading. Once the user is loaded, we get demo banana. Now in here, the other thing we're going to do is have a form that's going to have a whole lot of information. And we're actually just going to copy the thing over here, but what I might actually do is just create a new component. So it's going to be a new file in here that's going to say auth reset.svelte. So this is going to have all of the functions that we need to reset our auth. And I'm actually just going to copy that component into auth reset because it has a lot of good stuff. Now we can get rid of everything here because we don't need any of that sign up logic, but this form will be very handy. And depending on what is happening, so we're going to say let action equal to empty string. So nothing is going to happen. And depending on the state of action, so action equals, let's say, reset pass, then we're going to have reset. I'm actually going to delete that. And basically what we're going to do is have two buttons that can say reset password, reset email. So I might actually just add those in here. We'll have a div. We can style the div. We can say container div, just like that. And this can have a display of grid. And we're going to say grid template columns is going to be repeat 2, min, max, 0, and 1 fraction, just like that. And inside of here, that's the wrong one, auth reset. So now if we come up here, what we can do is inside of this div, which will just be there, we can open that up and have two buttons. So the first button can say update email. The next one can be a button that says update password, and the third one can actually be reset password. Actually, no, that'll go on the front page. So this will just say update password once we're logged in, because you need a password to be logged in. So now we have that all good. And if we look, we should see that, but we don't. And that's because we haven't actually rendered this component out inside of this private dashboard. So in here, what we're just going to do is have a auth reset, just like that. So that imported up the top. Now we load. We don't currently get anything, and that's because there's a whole lot of stuff in here that probably isn't working. Handle submit, email, password, and that's what's working. So this logic here doesn't make any sense. So now we save that, loading, and we get our update password and the rest of our login form, which we don't actually want. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to add an if-else block. Well, actually, even better, it's going to be two if blocks. So we're going to say #if action is equal to reset pass. Then we're going to have one form. So we're just going to close that if block. That can be a form here. And then we're going to have a second block that says if action is equal to reset email. Realistically, they're just updates, but it's whatever. So I might actually just change that to update. So it's a bit clearer. And then we'll just close that if block and add that second form. Just like that. So now we can wire up the handlers. So in here, we can just say on click is equal to pass in an arrow function, and we can just say action is equal to update email. So let's just check that that's working. That is indeed working. And we can copy that and paste it on here and say onClick action is equal to update pass. And so now we get a second form that's going to allow us to do that. So we can change these. So we're just going to need one input for each realistically. And I might just call that new pass. Just up here, we can change this value here, confirm pass. So it's new pass, and this one can be new email, just like that. And we can delete that password from there. So that's new email, which is cool. So now we have these two forms. Both of them are just going to handle the submit. Change the password, the placeholders, real nice and easy. And then the handle submit is just going to be similar. It's just going to update the things, and then the value should change. So instead, so in here, what we're going to do is just get rid of all of this logic and just say if not action. So if there's no action, which doesn't actually matter, we're just going to return, but the form actually won't be available. We're going to say if action is equal to update pass, then we're going to run the update password logic. So we're going to say await update password. So it's going to be auth handlers.update password. We're going to pass in the new password. So it's going to be new pass, and we'll return that so that the thing stops. And we're going to say if action is equal to new email, then we're just going to do the same thing. So return await auth handlers dot update email and pass in new email. So that should update our email, and we can actually check if these forms work now. So let's say we updated the email to demo. Well, that's actually the wrong form. Should be type email, that's update pass, that's update email. Right, so these are the wrong way around. So I'm actually just going to copy that one, paste it there, copy that one, and paste it there. So update email, new email is going to be updated at update.com. And now just before I do that, let's come over here, refresh this page. We can see that we now have still just got that one user, and that's what we're currently logged in as. If I submit that, and let's come look at this page, that has not worked. So let's just check if we got here. So console.log new email, update email, new at new.com. Let's see if that loads. So that's not getting there, and that's because that is incorrect. So it should be update email. I'm a pleb. So let's try that once more, new at new.com. We can see that get ID token is not a function, but that did execute, so that's actually fine. Let's just see if anything happened over here. So that didn't change. Let's just try the password one real quick, and we'll see if that works. Update password. So let's just make it updated pass. And we get a similar error. And I think that's because we actually just need to pass in the current user to both of these just there. So let's see if that fixes our problem. So let's try update the email, updated at update.com. And so it looked like that actually worked. However, it requires a recent login. So what we're going to do is just add a couple of buttons in here and change a few things. So we're going to start off by just changing, or actually better said, we're just going to add another button, and this is just going to say log out. So in here, and this is going to have an on click equal to call a function, and we're just going to call, well, actually even better, we can just directly pass in auth handlers.logout like that. So now we're going to have a logout button. If I refresh this page, that is not showing up, and that's because it's in auth. So we're going to copy that in there because I'm a muppet. Private dashboard, auth reset. Paste that in there. We just have to make sure that we have that imported, so that's all good. So now we have a logout button down the bottom, And if we type that, nothing will currently happen except that our user becomes null. So we get stuck on this loading page. So what we just want to add quickly is some logic that will send us to the correct page if the user is not logged in. And so we're actually going to add this into the layout component because this wraps everything. And so inside of this subscriber method, we're going to add some if statements. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say if browser. So the browser is going to say that basically the page is loaded. So we're just going to import browser from slash, well, actually it's $app/environment. Just like that. So we import browser, if browser, then we're going to have two sets of logic in here. So the first one's going to say if not authstore.current user. So that means if there's no current user and authstore.is loading. So if there's no current user and if is loading is false, so that means the loading is done, then what we want to do is we just want to, and we're just going to add one more check to that says window.location.href is not equal to slash. So that means that we're not on a login screen, we're in a protected route. Then what we're going to do is set window.location.href equal to the home screen. So once again, the browser is to check that we can access the window parameter. So if the browser exists, we can access the window parameter. Then we can check if the current user exists, if the authentication is loading, and the current URL. And if the current URL is on a protected route, we don't have a current user and we're not loading, then we redirect them home. And the last thing I forgot to do is we actually just have to return unsubscribe from this onMount component. So now what happens is we can see that I was routed to the login screen. However, it seems to be going berserk, and that's because this should actually just say path name. Sorry, this one should say path name, and this one should say href. So now we can see that that didn't work, so we get routed home. If I go to a private dashboard again, it just routes us home again. So that is now a protected route. And so now we can log in once again. So I can actually just say demo. Well, I actually forgot what the password is. I wonder if I can see the password. User ID. No, I don't think I can check the password. So what I'm going to do is create a new user. We're going to say demo2@demo.com. The password is going to be 12345, 12345, just like that. We'll submit. We get an error that says the password should be 6 letters long, so we'll just say 123456. We submit. We get logged into the login screen, and we got booted out, and that will be because of some logic that's going on in here. So what I might just do is console.log authstore. And try that again. So we can go demo2@demo.com, log in 123456, submit. That should log us into the screen, which it did. And we got sent home again. And I might actually just remove this external one and add that in there, just because we don't need so many layers of if checks. Demo2@demo.com, 123456, submit. We run that authentication and we get logged out again. So let's just disable this for a second. And I might actually just move this console into here so that we only console.log that. There, demo2@demo.com, 123456. So we get logged in successfully. One thing to note is that if I refresh this page, we actually hold the login, which is super convenient. And we can see that it's because the current user is null and is loading is true. So let's just say, let's see what this is returning. So let's say console.log current user, and we want to console.log authstore.is loading. So let's just check what those parameters are. So we'll log out. The logout screen works. Well, actually, no, it doesn't work yet because we haven't disabled that. So I'll just go back to the private route, but we can see that we currently don't have a user. is loading is set to false. So let's just manually come back to the home route. So we log in again, demo2@demo.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Submit that, close all of that. So we get undefined and undefined is our problem. Layout page 20. So when we log in, we're reaching this route, and that's because none of these exist. So I might just say, make them reactive statements and try that once more. So let's click log out. So that's going to log us out. So everything's set to false. We'll go back to the home route. We'll type demo2@demo.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Submit. And that didn't find it. That's the wrong auth. So we submit that. We get logged in. And now we can see that this doesn't work and that's working correctly. So I should be able to execute this logic and not get rerouted, which I don't. So now when I click log out, what's going to happen is we get redirected home to the logout page as soon as the user doesn't exist. And now if I go demo2@demo.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, submit, we get logged into the private dashboard. It loads all of our information. We have a current user. We can refresh the page. That current user is staying. Now we can update this to say demo3@update.com. Submit that. That actually worked correctly. However, it has not updated our thing, but let's just try refreshing the page. So now we can see that demo3 has indeed been changed. And so the one thing we'll have to do on the changing of the username is just add that to our store function in here. So when we update the email, we'll just want to add a function to the auth store. So we can just say auth store.update, take the current value and return, spread the current just like that. And for current user, we want that to be equal to the value of current user. So .current user, just like that. However, we're going to update the email parameter to be the new email. So that should be a little update function that's just going to change the value of our store. So if I update that to demo4@nice.com, we submit that, we can see that the email has changed. And if I log out, we can now go demo4@nice.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, submit that, and we get logged in with this new credential. So that should work for the update password as well. The last thing we have to do is add a forgot password store to our front page. So if we just come into Auth, what we can do is just in here, we can say already have under the sign up, we can just add a second div that says forgot password just here. And then that can just go away. And so in here, what we can do is send a password reset email. So we can just now change this onClick handler to refer to authhandlers.resetPassword, just like that. So now when we click on this div, it will send a forgot password email. Says that we have an issue there, and that's because the reset password obviously must take an auth parameter as well. Let's see if that works. Forgot password. That's exactly right. So for this to function, we actually need an email. So we'll say if not email, then we'll just return nothing. So I think let's try that again. So forgot password, nothing happens. Whoops, I added that to the wrong one. That should actually be in there. This is staying the way that it is. Update the email. And all we do is just in here, add that statement. So we can, the author's actually already passed. So we should actually just be able to forgot password, nothing happens. And so if we try console.logging that email, let's reload that page and see if it works. Pointer events, post, that's still not working. So email is all of this. Of course, it's pretty obvious. So what we actually need to do is pass an argument, and that's my bad entirely. So I'm a Muppet. Essentially what we have to do is use an arrow function in here and call it and pass in the email. That's me being an absolute pleb. So we were actually just executing the function willy-nilly. So now what we should be able to do is just forgot password. We get in here, which means that we don't have an email. if we have an email, let's say demo4 at, what was it? Let's just check. Demo4 at nice.com. So that's cool. So demo4 at nice.com. We can send the forgot password. We get to the email and the password has been sent. And so that will just send them an email to the user's inbox where they can click a link and it will take them to a reset password page, which is all very simple. And then next time they log in, that will work for them. So that's basically it. That's most of our functions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can submit, we can log in, we come to a protected route. We can update our password, same thing, new password, new pass. Submit that, that'll be our new password. If we log out and try that, demo4 at nice.com, the new pass is new pass, and submit. We get logged in and our new password is working perfectly. We have the current user, we can update the email, we can log out. And if we log out, we have no user and try go to private dashboard, we get the loading page and we get redirected to the login screen. So now the excellent thing about this is that this private route, the fact that we've implemented inside of our layout, will work for any other private route that you have. So any path name in here that is not equal to that, it's pretty easy, not equal to this, pretty easy to update. But yeah, that's pretty much the tutorial. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and sub, leave a comment down below what you'd like me to do next, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.